Okay, today we're going to do a demo on drawing paper bags, and we're going to talk a little bit about the setup of the still life for your paper bags, and like how to organize that. And so, whoa, got dogs here. So if we look at the still life right now, what I have set up here, the bags are set up so that I have one bag in front of another bag. I have one bag casting a shadow onto another bag. I have a direct light. I have a lamp over here, and it's a warm lamp. And so those are the main things I would suggest that you think about. Now I happen to have two bags of two different sizes, which I like. You don't necessarily have to do that, but I recommend it. This bag is just a standard grocery store brown paper bag, and this bag is those paper bags you can buy at the grocery store for what you used to put your bag lunches in back in the day. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about, now that we have our still life organized, how do we figure out our overall structure for our drawing? And so I'm working in Vine for this first gesture, and the most important thing about your bag is going to be, in any of your bag drawings, is going to be the organization of this line, like these overall diagonals, versus this line. If you can get those right, then the rest falls into play. So, and that really comes down to the fact that when you draw a bag, like a paper bag like this, you need to first think of it as I am drawing a box. That what we're drawing here are two boxes, two kind of thin boxes, and then we figure out how it's different from that. How are these different from boxes? The most obvious way once we start is we realize they're not exactly like boxes because they get narrower up here at the top. Why do they get narrower? They get narrower because they fold in on each other, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But before we get there, we have to get some proportion decisions right. Probably the most important is getting this height, getting exactly how much bigger this bag is in terms of height versus how much bigger is it in terms of width. I think I'm a little bit shy on the width. I think the height's about right, but I think that this line needs to extend a little bit further out. Let's try that as a distance. All right. I think that's approximately proportional. We have dogs wandering around in our video, as well as wandering speech therapists looking for clients. Okay, so we have the overall structure. You notice when I'm working in Vine, I often like to just kind of wipe down the whole drawing for a second. This gives me a chance to re-question all of my contour line decisions, all of my major measurements, just to see if I'm really accurate about them. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to get rid of all of these lines. But the next major thing I would start to think about is overall value organization. It's very important with bags that we remember to pay attention to the big, the more general first, rather than rushing to think about the slight variations of value. Like when we look at the surface of this paper bag, we can see a ton of little crimples and wrinkles on the surface, changes of plane, and that's a lot of different changes of value. But all of those changes of value are pretty minor, compared to the overall fact that this is a light plane, this is a dark plane, this is a light plane, this is a dark plane, and then this is a cast shadow. So we want to make sure that we put those things in first, right? It's all about seeing the most major, the most fundamental first, and not letting the minor things become too important. So Lyndon, give me like a 30-second notice when we get close to 10 minutes.
All right.
Okay, at this point, I'll probably switch to black Conte. Still trying to think about value in its pretty much most general and hierarchical form. So I'm still not worrying that much about any of the changes of value on the surface. Like I might put a very slight suggestion of a change of plane right there, but overall I'm just going to keep it pretty light and make it about the major structures of that we're looking at, the major changes of value. I'm going to note now that this plane, even though it's on the shadow side, this plane gets a significantly larger amount of light than the rest of that shadow plane does. And I'm going to do the same right there. And that's part of the structure of the paper bag, of how it folds in on itself, right? The way these bottom parts, it's not until it's completely fully open to those bottom triangular parts, they're no longer on a diagonal, they flip up completely vertically. But as long as the bag is kind of in this half folded stage, there are these kind of like almost roof peak type structures. They're on a diagonal plane. Similarly, these major folds are more important than any of those little tiny folds. So I'm going to start to put them in. And one of the things to pay attention to, even though this is a pretty quick gesture, pay attention to, those of you who had me for drawing one, remember this, that I often point out that when we're looking at surfaces and changes of light and dark on a surface, one of the rules that I go with is if we see a change of plane on a surface and we see a dark, then we're usually also going to see a corresponding light and vice versa. So, I'd like to give you an example. I have to build up the values a little bit more in this one area just so you can kind of see it. But like, if we have this shadow that represents that major fold and the crumple right there, then we also need to make sure that we're looking for the corresponding light that goes with that fold. And so there you go. Next video I'm going to do after this one is I'm going to do one in red Conte and show you just a little bit of how you might, on like a 30-minute gesture, how you might approach it differently working in red Conte versus what we're doing here with Vine and black Conte. They're not all that different from each other, really. And then maybe later I'll come back with another video of like finishing stages on both the red Conte and the black Conte.
Yeah, we're close to 10 minutes.
Close to 10 minutes? All right, well that's a pretty good wrapping up point to end the demo on. Why don't you pan back to the still life setting for a second and then back to the page. There's some corrections that need to be hammered out. Probably most notably, this bottom angle is off that I'm noticing now that I'm sitting back from it. So the next time you see this in a video, you'll probably see that will have been corrected. Okay, thank you very much.